plays fantastically. Some eventually go on to successful adult careers, and some do not. Yehudi Menuhin was a child prodigy and is a successful violinist. Mozart was a child prodigy and, historically, a successful composer. But his own life was a mess, and he died when he was 35 in poverty. In the early part of this century, a scholarly psychological study compared a young Hungarian pianist to Mozart. The young Hungarian did not die when he was 35, but many people thought he had. There is no doubt that Erwin Nyiregyhàzi, now 75 years old, was a certifiable infant prodigy. There is also no doubt that he's been broke most of his life, has slept on subways, had 9 wives, drinks a great deal, and hasn't owned a piano in 40 years. But he was a prodigy.
I took my first piano lessons at the age of 4.5. But it didn't influence me very much. I had my own ideas, even at that time, how to interpret certain kind of music.
Encountered anybody who plays as loudly as he does. He gets up there where most pianists are at their loudest, and then he just grows after that. It's amazing.
His suit hadn't been cleaned in months, and here I was sitting next to one of the greatest pianists of all times, who obviously was a broken-down hobo. He's the Frankenstein of music. Sometimes he's a celestial saint, and sometimes he's a wonderful old grandfather, and sometimes he's a rotten bastard.
I've been married 9 times so far. It isn't as bad as it appears. Only 6 divorces, and 3 of them unfortunately died.
The life story of Erwin Nyiregyhàzi would make terrible fiction. No one would believe it. But they may soon be able to hear for themselves if he is the piano genius his supporters claim. The International Piano Archives persuaded Nyiregyhàzi to let them record hours of his playing. He agreed, but insisted on near secrecy. The recording was done at the Scottish Rite Temple in San Francisco during 4 days in March. It was unusual. Nyiregyhàzi will not practice and only rarely uses sheet music. He says if he's ever played a piece, he remembers it. And he does. And if he likes a particular passage, he may play it twice. He does not care if anyone approves of that. He plays the way he wants to play, and he lives the way he wants to live, and he will not change.
Plays just the way the great pianists in the 19th century played. And since the bulk of the piano repertoire in the world today is romantic music, it's very important to music history that this man appeared in the age of technology so that we can record his playing and gain insight into the way that romantic composers really wanted their music played.
Most of my life, I had no piano at all to play on or to practice on, but that didn't bother me too much because I can hear music in my mind, and it gives me about as great a satisfaction as though I were actually playing, so it really doesn't make too much of a difference to me.
Nyiregyhàzi was born in Budapest in 1903. By the time he was 2, he was playing tunes on a toy piano. He was composing not long after that, and has now written more than 700 compositions. For 6 years, starting when he was 5, he was studied by Amsterdam's psychological laboratory, a study that led to this book, still a standard reference. But what most profoundly affected him, he says, was his hearing, at age 12, the music of Hungarian composer Franz Liszt, and it was Liszt he played at his successful Carnegie Hall debut in 1920. But there was criticism. A magazine article said the 17-year-old pianist could neither tie his shoes nor cut his meat, and his romantic style was criticized.
Most of the people, in other words, most people didn't agree with the way I looked at things, so especially at music, and yet I would say was that I played music in a manner that the music critics of the United States were not accustomed to.
By 1925, after a fight with his manager, he was broke and sleeping in New York subways.
The date as to when I had to frequent the subway accommodations in New York City, let us say about 1925. Up till then, I was in no actual need to sleep in the Grand Central Shuttle, Times Square subway. And anyhow, that didn't take place so very many times, but on a few occasions that is quite true, that they had no other accommodations. So I moved to California, to Los Angeles in 1928. So that would be about 50 years ago.
From there, it was downhill.
At first, I lived, when I came to Los Angeles, I lived on a small hotel on Main Street, not in a very good district. And then I gave a concert at the Philharmonic Auditorium. Then I had a little money, and then I could live in another better hotel for a while until the money was gone. And then again, I had to give another concert. And so it was from week to week, more or less.
Most of the time, it was less rather than more, but there was some work.
I worked in the movies for quite a while in Hollywood, and as a matter of fact, I participated in 2 pictures, one called A Song to Remember, based on the life of Chopin, where the actual music, the piano music, was played by Mr. José Iturbe, the Spanish pianist, but the hands shown were my hands.
Don't you hear it?
He actually made 4 films, 2 of them thrillers, including this one with Peter Lorre. In this one, Nyiregyhàzi was a murderous, piano-playing, disembodied hand. It was a considerable come-down for a man who had played for royalty when he was 8 and who had been hailed as a genius in Europe and the United States. Still, he did have friends in Hollywood, including Bela Lugosi and Gloria Swanson, and he would still play an occasional concert. The last one was in Norway in 1938. After that, Erwin Nyiregyhàzi, infant prodigy, piano genius, prolific composer, simply disappeared. He and his various wives lived in cheap hotels in the seedier sections of Los Angeles. One of them encouraged his drinking to make him more aggressive. He divorced her because she yawned whenever he played Beethoven. He married his 9th wife in 1972. They lived in this hotel in Los Angeles. She was older than he and ill. He needed money to pay her medical bills. Friends persuaded him to give another recital to raise the money. He had played some recitals since he stopped giving concerts in 1938, but only when he needed money. He needed it in 1973. That May, in San Francisco, Nyiregyhàzi gave a recital at the old First Presbyterian Church. Entirely by accident, Terry McNeil of the International Piano Archives heard Nyiregyhàzi playing, went in, and recorded the recital on a cassette tape recorder. He took the tape, 2 pieces by Liszt, to Gregor Binko, founder and president of the IPA.
I first met him in June of 1973. It was kind of a surrealistic experience because after discovering his playing on the tape of his concert earlier that year in the old First Church in San Francisco, he became an idol. To meet him was a very exciting thing for me, and we met in the lobby of the St. Francis Hotel. And at that time, he looked much worse than he does today, and as a matter of fact, he had been starving for many months.